Good morning, world. I'm Steve Rao, the host of Pod and Roku TV's World Edition, and I look forward to kicking off this show today. And we are so excited. It's April 18th here in the U.S. and around the world. I greet you live from the All-America city of Morrisville. And on this show, we talk about global affairs, innovation, an increasingly turbulent world, politically, economically. And we continue to see gun violence plaguing America with the recent tragedy at a birthday party in Alabama. We've seen turmoil in Sudan, and we're continuing to see a lot of focus on the media recently on artificial intelligence as much of the conversation about how AI will be affecting our lives. And we're going to talk about a lot of other global issues. I've been sort of busy this morning, so I'm going to have Mark Lee wrap us through that. And we were expecting a guest as well, and that guest is Mike Arriola, who will be joining us soon. And he is from the Small Business Administration, and he's going to be talking about the SBA, the Small Business Administration, its role in terms of supporting small businesses, and a big event we have coming up on Thursday when the Ambassador of India, along with some senior officials from the SBA and the Associate Commerce Secretary for Trade, Arun Venkataraman, will all be kicking off the U.S.-India Business Connection. We'll be talking about the ties between North Carolina and India, and opportunities for small businesses to increase trade, export more products, and of course, growing their businesses. So we're going to go ahead and get started, Mark, and then we'll wait for our guest. I'm going to let you drive this show because I have to leave at 10:30, but we'll go ahead and get started. And
well, the guest is already here, so I'm going to bring in Mike, and Mike can talk to you about what he's got going on. And then, of course, we do have Dan and Nick, but the guest is here. Let's bring in guests and have you have that conversation with them.
Okay, fantastic.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Mike. It's a pleasure to have you here today, and I'm sorry for the little lag in my Wi-Fi. But folks, for those of you around the country and the world, we have with us today Mike Arriola, who is a good friend of mine, but also the director of North Carolina's SBA. I would be here a very long time if I read his resume, but he's an outstanding leader for our state in North Carolina. And here today to talk about the Small Business Administration, its role in supporting small businesses, and to talk a little bit about a big event we have coming on in Thursday in Morrisville, North Carolina. Michael, tell us a little bit about the Small Business Administration for those around the country, about the Biden administration, the SBA, and what its role is in our government.
Sure, happy to do that, Steve. The SBA is a federal agency. We're not so much a regulatory body as we are a service providing body. And the kinds of services we provide include SBA loans in partnership with all kinds of lenders, banks, credit unions, and CDFIs. We provide government certification programs to enable small businesses to tap into the federal contracting marketplace. And we also have an array of counseling and training programs across the country, including the Small Business Development Center Network. There's the volunteer network of SCORE. There is an array of women's business centers. And finally, there are business outreach centers across the country. So that in a nutshell is what the SBA does, what we have to offer for small businesses across the country.
Fantastic. And so like loans and all these different things you're providing, you're helping them with the resources. Now, how many small businesses are there, before we get to the event, how many small businesses are there in the U.S. today? Do we have an idea of how many there are?
Yeah, I think last I heard the number is something like 33 million. Here in the state of North Carolina, there's just under 1 million small businesses. So the number of small businesses as a proportion of the total number of businesses across the country is very, very high. In this state, for example, it's at about 99%. So the number of small businesses, their contributions to the broader economy are tremendous.
Fantastic. It's exciting. And about 10 million new starts from, we didn't have Gabe Esparza on. He was the Associate Administrator of Trade, but that's exciting. Now tell us a little bit about this event we have on Thursday. But before you do that, this whole notion of diaspora communities, immigrant communities. So we've got a big event coming in Mooresville I'm going to have you talk about. But before we do that, could you talk a little about immigrant communities and why the SBA believes it's important to support these kinds of communities? I know in Seattle, you had the one with Korea. We've got one in Mooresville. Could you explain that, please?
Sure. Yeah, happy to do so, Steve. Yeah, immigrant communities, diaspora communities are incredibly important to the SBA, particularly in this state, North Carolina, as well as the country as a whole. We know that immigrants and minority folks are growing by leaps and bounds, contributing to the economies and the communities in which they serve. And the whole idea behind SBA's outreach with these diaspora communities is that folks that immigrate to this country, folks that may have roots, ancestral or otherwise, in countries, in foreign countries, either do business with their home countries or have the potential or the desire to do business with their countries of origin or the countries of their ancestors. And so the whole idea is to tie SBA programs and services and resources to these small businesses here in this country with a view to enabling them to do business with their countries of origin or the countries of their ancestors' origin. So happening in Mooresville, North Carolina, just outside of Raleigh on Thursday, April 20th, the SBA is pleased to be able to hold a diaspora community focusing on the Indian community here in that particular area of Raleigh. We know that there are many, many folks of Indian descent and ancestry in the Raleigh area. And so we believe that that is an ideal area in which to do this sort of diaspora outreach. So we're going to be inviting Indian folks actually from across the state to come on over to Mooresville. And it's going to be at the Hindu Society of North Carolina. We're going to have a number of VIPs deliver welcoming remarks. And then we're going to have panel discussions, including SBA and related export resources that folks can tap into to trade with India or other countries for that matter. We have another breakout panel that's going to be talking about how to finance your startup or your expansion. We have another panel discussion of successful entrepreneurs that are going to talk about their own journey in entrepreneurship. And sort of throughout the entire day's proceedings, it's going to be the idea of folks here in North Carolina doing business with India or tapping into business opportunities to do so.
Okay, that's right. Yeah. And so if people want to sign up, it's the US-India connection.eventbrite. It's going to sell out soon. It was announced just yesterday. The Indian ambassador is coming. The governor will also be there as well. My phone's been ringing off the hook since this thing has been announced. So, I mean, that's exciting. Good news for us. But we'll all be there. And it's just going to be a great opportunity. I guess my last question before we bring in our panel, we're going to spend about 20 more minutes with you as long as you have. We know you're a busy man. Is what do you think some of the outcomes are that we want from this? Would it be just people knowing a little bit more about the resources of the SBA? Would it perhaps be learning from small businesses about if they've had success exporting? And then also successes, we're going to be hearing a little bit about technology. And I think everybody's excited about that panel because just ever since Sundar Pichai was on 60 Minutes this week, the news blasts are just all about AI and technology. So what are your thoughts about just some outcomes that you all are trying to achieve with this program?
All of the above, Steve. It's funny that you asked that question because very recently there was a survey, I think it was done through NFIB, that surveyed small business owners, and a very high percentage of them indicated that the federal government needs to do a better job in communicating what kinds of resources and services are available to them as small business owners. I think I saw the number of about 85%. Well, a big part of SBA's mission is to close that gap and to let folks know what programs are available to them as small business owners. We are a federal agency. We're funded by taxpayer dollars, and it's our job to ensure that folks know what programs are available to them. And this diaspora event that we have coming up on Thursday this week is one such opportunity for us to be able to showcase exactly those kinds of programs. So first and foremost, the primary outcome that I would want to see is that we have a community, an audience that is better educated as to the whole suite of SBA programs and services available to them, as well as the programs and services available from some of our partners that are going to be there. In addition to SBA, many of our resource partners are going to be represented, including the Small Business and Technology Development Center, the Women's Business Center, the Veterans Business Outreach Center, and we're going to have a couple of other folks, including the Economic Development Partnership of North Carolina and the United States Commercial Service. So those would be the key players that are going to be taking part in this event with us. And these are folks that small business owners really need to get to know, particularly, but not only, particularly if they're interested in doing trade overseas. That would be the primary goal. And you know, as an outcome of that, some of the other goals that we would like to see is continued or enhanced access to capital by virtue of some of the lenders and the lending resources that are going to be showcased. So awareness, also access.
Fantastic. That's right. We're going to bring in our panel. Mark, go ahead and come on in. I know we have some questions. It's very informal, kind of like
yeah, we do. Coming in, and I've also got Dan with it, and I think Nick Palveda is with us as well. But one of the questions I had, Mike, and everything was about entrepreneurship and the rise of entrepreneurship during this time of the pandemic, which I know we are winding out of. But I was wondering, if the SBA can be creating any new policies to help with a lot of the newer entrepreneurs, because I've seen a rise in entrepreneurship in all in that space, and also what are they doing about entrepreneurs that are more in that hybrid space, because they are having to adjust to working from both home and from the traditional office setting. So I didn't know if the SBA had any kind of projects that were addressing those issues.
Yeah, Mark, I think you came in a little bit choppy, but if I could restate your question, it was along the lines of what does the SBA think of? What does the SBA have for folks that are adjusting in this new normal?
Yes.
Yeah. I think the current business environment is vitally important. I think sort of the time thing that we, particularly in the state of North Carolina, is we have seen just a tremendous growth in the number of new business filings. 2021 was a record in new business filings for the state of North Carolina. We had almost 180,000. And that was a record growth on top of what was previously in 2020 a record number of small business filings. In 2022, North Carolina came very close to the record set in 2021, but the brisk pace still continued. So how is the SBA responding to that? We're responding to that is exactly as could be expected. We also posted record growth in terms of SBA loans provided to North Carolina businesses. In 2021, we saw over $1 billion in SBA lending provided to small businesses of all kinds across the state of North Carolina. And that was right in the midst of all of the COVID pandemic stuff that we were also doing. So we were multitasking in a very big way. We were providing financing to these new businesses that were starting up, but we were also providing financing for COVID relief purposes. And all told, over 500,000 small businesses and other applicants took advantage of over $3 billion in COVID financing during that whole pandemic. We have also.
Is he breaking up, or is it me?
Yeah, no, it's him. He's
the Small Business Technology Score. All did likewise accommodate the pandemic need for counseling and training. So they took advantage of Zoom and other platforms and that sort of thing. And that continues to this day. Yeah. Does that help to answer your question?
Yeah, you broke up a little bit, but I think we got the gist of it. You're back now. It might have been a Wi-Fi connection. But
yeah, I think we got the gist of it. I know Nick's got some questions as well.
I do have a question, Mike, because I've done, let me see, quite a few startups, successful ones since 1984. And one of the problems, and I've done a lot of research, obviously, on startups, et cetera. One of the problems that exist on startup community is the failure rate. In other words, it's like 50% will fail in 1 year, 90% in 5 years. Okay. How do you address this unbelievably huge failure rate for people that are dreamers and schemers. But hey, the reality is the numbers are what they are. It's great to form millions of companies in North Carolina, but the reality is half of them will be gone by the end of the year, and 90% will be gone by 5 years. What are your thoughts on that? I hate to put the hard question, but somebody's got to do it, Mike.
That's okay. Nick, is the question for me?
Yeah, it's about the failure rate of startups. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, sure. Yeah, you know what? I was at a conference last week where Secretary of State Elaine Marshall was speaking, and Elaine Marshall is Secretary of State. Her department is the one that actually approves these new business filings. And she said something that was kind of funny, but also very serious to your point, Nick. And that is a lot of times entrepreneurs, because Elaine Marshall was an entrepreneur herself, a lot of times entrepreneurs wake up in the morning and decide, this is the day. This is the day I'm going to start my business. So they go to the Secretary of State's office and going to get off and running to start their business. I think the message, the big takeaway that I take from that is the following, and it's something that we say in the small business technical assistance space. Fail to plan and you plan to fail. It is vitally important for folks looking to start a business to put forth their business plan first and foremost, because only then can they determine, well, am I going to be adequately funded? Do I need to seek external financing? Do I have the requisite personal resources to contribute to my business before I go out and seek a loan from a bank? A while ago, I encountered a small business owner. They were upfitting a restaurant, and they were using some of their personal funds, and they were already deep into this refurbishment of this brand new restaurant they were starting up. And then they came to the SBA wanting some advice on how to get a business loan. You don't do that. You seek out, you structure your financing plan. That should be the first thing that you do. In other words, not exhaust your person and go to a lender or to SBA with a hope that we're going to come and because if she had come to us, if she had come to our resource, we would have cautioned first and foremost, a startup restaurant is one of the riskiest types of ventures to start. And therefore, it's one that is it's very difficult for our lenders, banks, credit unions, et cetera, to entertain financing. And I use that as a cautionary tale. Do your business plan, do your financing plan up front so that you're aware of the kinds of resources that you're going to be expected to put to the table, and so that you can have the rest of the financing lined up as well.
Okay.
I'm sorry, can I just follow up with Mike regarding Nick's point?
Yeah.
What happens with the financing in terms of the failure rate and the payback of these loans? Are these personally guaranteed, or are they just bellied up and you guys don't get your money back?
All in the commercial lending space, SBA does require personal guarantees of all persons owning 20% or more of the company. That's not just an SBA rule, that's standard banking practice. Mm-hmm. So persons owning 20% or more of the business need to provide a government guarantee, a personal guarantee on the loan. SBA's role in an SBA loan is to provide a government guarantee, sometimes as high as 85%, meaning that if at some point in the course of the loan, the borrower is not able to make payment, the lender can call an SBA and we can pay up 85% of whatever the balance happens to be. Now, before all of that happens, it's the lender's responsibility to work with the borrower to make sure that is there something that we're missing? Can we maybe figure out a revision in monthly payments so that the loan can be retired? It's not that everybody pulls the trigger and we go into foreclosure, that sort of thing. So the lender is tasked really with working with the borrower to see if there's any kind of workout that can be arranged. I forgot what the rest of your question was, Lee.
No, because like Nick's saying, after 2 years, 90% of these companies are out of business.
Yeah.
But that's just a lot of loan money out there that is not being repaid.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that, all of those businesses that fail within 2 years have SBA loans. I mean, our failure rate is a lot lower than some of the numbers that you're talking about. All told, I think it's still at about 3% in terms of the SBA's loss rate. So that's still pretty low.
Mike, what about,
like I said, I mean, Go ahead, Nick.
What about education? In other words, I and I guess Dan Worthington got our fill of education, but in high school and middle school, they don't. Are they teaching entrepreneurship? Are they teaching some of the basic principles, which I see as get prepared to work 80 hours a week? All the people, and I work with a lot of small businesses, hundreds, if not thousands of them around the country, handling their pensions. All of them have one thing in common: they work 80 to 100 hours a week. Does anyone give them the education? Look, if you want to be successful, get prepared to double your hours. If you think you're going to work 40 hours and be successful and own your own business, you can just forget it. Is there any education in this area? Any practical education that's being done by the SBA?
Yeah, there sure is. Our resource partners in particular, SCORE. If you go to score.org and check out the chapter nearest you, they have entrepreneurship education like this. My staff members, Penny and Eileen, are doing a financial literacy seminar in the next couple of weeks as well. I think it's Financial Literacy Month. So that is something that we're working on right now. But virtually all of our resource partners have something along the lines of, how to start a business, financing for your business, that sort of thing. And that, I think, is one big takeaway I want from this discussion here, as a lot of times folks just don't know. Well, go to sba.gov and find out, because these resources were paid for by you as a taxpayer, and they're available. A simple Google search can lead you in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And I
Just
think that-
really quickly, if I can, are you surprised when it comes to something Nick said earlier, at the amount of people that are going into business that aren't aware that they need a business plan? Because I know that a lot of times people are thinking about going into entrepreneurship and they don't really do the planning. I know that Sasha is in the space of investment and business, and some of the other folks are as well. And we've had this discussion that sometimes people have these great ideas, but they don't necessarily think of the planning aspect of it in their own structure and their own planning as they go into the businesses. And I was also curious if there are some particular businesses that you are seeing that are having rapid growth here in North Carolina.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that, Mark. Can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, no problem. The first question was, are you surprised at the lack of business plans that folks are having when they're applying for SBAs? Because I know a number of people that are trying to do startups, but they don't necessarily have business plans. And then the second question was, what businesses are we seeing growth in?
Yeah, as for the business plan question, I mean, I don't think any lender, particularly if you're just starting up, will entertain any business loan application without a business plan. I mean, that's just going to be required. Now, in terms of growth in SBA loans, for example, it's really hard to say that we see any particular concentration. I mean, it's just across the board in terms of the variety of small businesses that are being funded. Really, I mean, you can't just say that there's a concentration or any particular trend discerning at this point. But that's just kind of all the way it's always been. I mean, we do so many across the board that there's just a huge variety in terms of the types of businesses that are being started up.
Yeah, and then also I think during the pandemic we saw just so much effort being made through PPP and loans. But what's amazing is there's still so much resources out there, and we look forward to this event on Thursday. If we want to invite Roku TV to come to the Hindu side of North Carolina. Are there any final insights you have, Mike? I know you've got a long week ready for this big event, and we've got an event tomorrow in Greensboro. Any final thoughts to share with us?
Yeah, just go to Eventbrite, the U.S.-India Business Connection, and that'll take you to the registration link. Don't forget to bring your picture ID. We will be checking, and hope to see some of you there at the conference. It should be really
absolutely.
Like, really quickly, as I was thinking about it, how much is the SBA doing to target different groups in terms of getting loans? Because I've also worked with some African American businesses, and of course there are Hispanic businesses. So how much is the SBA doing to make sure that there is growth in different sectors of our population?
Yeah, particularly our underserved populations, Mark?
Yeah.
Yes,
A while ago.
underserved populations.
Yeah. I think when he first took office, President Biden signed off an executive order requiring that all federal agencies ensure equitable access to our programs and services. And in February, the president signed another executive order doubling down on that commitment to ensure equity amongst our programs and services, requiring, among other things, plans, accountability measures, and that sort of thing to ensure that federal agencies not only have the plan in place, but that we're actually executing. And that's exactly what the SBA is doing. We sort of infuse all of our actions, all of our outreach with an equitable lens, because we understand that not all populations have historically had equitable access to federal resources. And that is a big mission of the SBA and big mission of mine as the district director for North Carolina, is to ensure that these populations do have equitable access to counseling and training, to our certification programs, and to our loan programs first and foremost, so that they too can take advantage of the American dream. Very important question. Thank you for posing that, Mark.
Isn't there already a preference for minority-owned businesses and women-owned businesses in federal contracting?
There are. The Small Business Act targets 23 cents out of every federal contracting dollar to go to women-owned small businesses, socially disadvantaged owned small businesses, and veteran-owned small businesses, among others. And each of those about 5%, depending upon the various measures. And by the way, for those businesses regarded to be socially and economically disadvantaged under the 8A program, it's not just minority folks, but also those that can claim via a preponderance of evidence that they have suffered during their lifetimes, sort of being excluded from the mainstream of American society as the verbiage goes. What does that mean? Women, for example, are not considered minorities for federal contracting purposes, but a white woman, for example, could successfully apply to the 8A program, provided she can prove with a preponderance of evidence that she has been discriminated against, for example, throughout her lifetime. So yes, to answer your question, there are some preference targets for minorities in the contracting space. I believe the federal government has been successful in achieving all of them except for one, and that is the contracting program that focuses on historically underutilized business zones. And these are economically distressed areas that anybody conceivably could live in, where the whole purpose of that is to provide federal contracting opportunities that would then boost the economic livelihood of these distressed areas. So this one is a geographic kind of characterization and not a personal demographic one. And that one we're working hard to get even more businesses signed up into the Hub Zone program.
Didn't President Trump have some federal programs for these opportunity zones? Didn't he create through Congress legislation that permitted tax advantages for investing in these opportunity zones?
Yeah, that would be kind of like part of the IRS bailiwick. We don't really have any program specific to opportunity zones, although we did kind of have a little outreach initiative surrounding opportunity zones and how some of our programs can help boost that.
Makes sense.
Yeah, we did absolutely. Well, it's been a pleasure to have him. He's got a busy day. We're going to bring him back periodically along with Alan Thomas, who's the Southeastern director. And we want to thank you all. Remember, for every startup that we start, every company, we had about 6 jobs, and that's a lot of jobs. So, 95% plus of jobs, and even in North Carolina, are small businesses. So, Michael, thank you so much. Look forward to seeing you on Thursday. And we invite everyone for this India Business Connection event this Thursday in Mooresville, wherever you are in the state. And if you're around the country, come on out, because it is a national event. We'll love to see you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, definitely appreciate it. Mike, I know you're beginning to leave and everything, but I did have one quick question, which Dan actually alluded to. Are enterprise zones still very popular and everything? Because I know that there was a time that they were very popular in different communities and they were trying to build those up. Are we still seeing those around the country as much as we used to, particularly here in North Carolina? Because I know even Floyd McKissick was involved in some of those enterprise zones, senior, that is, not junior, but and the creation of Soul City and other things. And he was a
SBA program.
Republican here in North
But yeah, I'm
Carolina.
happy to have a
Are we
conversation
seeing a lot
with you
with the
offline
enterprise?
about that.
Yeah. Michael, what did you say?
Yeah,
Sorry.
as I was mentioning, it's been a while since I've taken a look at enterprise zones. I can't even recall if that was an SBA initiative, but I'm happy to have a conversation with you offline about that. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll try to find out. Well, Mark, I've got to leave as well, but I want to thank Michael Ariola for being with us, the North Carolina Small Business Administration Director. Thank you, Michael. Have a great day. And I'll be back tomorrow, folks. So Mark, send us the live link so we can share it with SBA. And I'm going to have you take over the show now, Mark, and talk about all the great things going on in the world.
Well, it'll be a combination of me and Nick, because there's definitely some background noise here at the area of Durham that I'm at in that space. But one of the things I was going to turn over to Nick and myself and everything is the conversation that we've not been getting to that much, which is around what's going on in Ukraine. So we do have Sasha Starr, and I'd love to hear what Sasha's got in that regards. I do know we have the Ukraine, Russia, China show coming up at about another 30 minutes or so from now. But if you can give us some insight before we get to that show, and I'm sure there are some other issues that we'll get to as well. But Sasha, I'm turning it over to you.
I don't have any significant news really to report. There are more political issues now, international stature than actual fights, because the fights are very clear. Ukraine is getting ready to a huge counterattack. In the meantime, they are containing Russian forces. The Russian forces are essentially the first army of about 180,000 people. It's all gone. They're all dead. So everybody in Russia who is fighting now, they're all newly conscripted or just found somewhere through mobilization efforts or so on. They're completely incompetent. They're not being trained. They can't really fight. It's so-called, it's just human meat, really, which Ukrainian meat grinder just takes over and just devastates it. So I think Russians become more stingy with their meat, because like before, you would see well over 1,000 Russians killed every day. Now it's just like 570, 620. Those numbers are not there.
Yeah.
But meat grinder can
Sasha,
meat being supplied.
When is Putin going to ever learn? When is Putin going to ever learn that this is not going to work?
In his second life.
Okay.
After his first one will end hopefully soon, then he'll learn some other things. He is complete now ostracized by the rest of the world, and even China. Now I'm following this the visit of Chinese officials now in Moscow. They are completely taken over Russia. Whatever they still have left, some technology or something, China is just taking it all over for a song. For a promise to keep buying their natural resources for a huge discount. And even that's not for example. They are not able to supply Russia with arms, because United States very politely explained to them what will be follow-up if China will start helping Russians with their firearms. And one of the most devastating things what U.S. can do to China is the Chinese air traffic increased in the last couple of years tenfold, from 65 million people to 650 million people. They need a lot of planes. Now, they are producing some primitive planes, whatever they are, except one thing, they don't have the engine, the power of those planes. The engines are being supplied by Pratt and Whitney company. and there is just one telephone call, and Brittany will stop supplying these engines to China. And without engines, no plane can take over or land or do anything. So they will have their planes on the ground, and these people who want to fly, they can go into the plane, sit there for half an hour, and then go back to wherever they want to go. That's a huge threat, and China cannot ignore it. There are some others. This is the biggest one.
No, Sasha, just really quickly, is there any fear at all? Because I've been hearing reports lately from different news sources about, of course, the money that is gone and is desperately needed and is much needed for the Ukrainians. But then there had been some reports about some of that money being pocketed. And because it was pocketed, then even Zelensky himself was kind of taking action against some of those folks within his own military that were pocketing that money. Now, whether he's done enough action or not is the question, and whether that is going to turn the tide of support away from the Ukrainians. So I was wondering, do you, as a Ukrainian citizen or former citizen and definitely a supporter of that area, have any fears about some of these misappropriations of money kind of changing the narrative of support? And like I said, Ukrainian is doing a very valiant job of fighting, and they definitely need to continue to push back against the Russian monster. But I was just wondering, is that a concern of yours when you hear of these reports?
Well, I'm not going to go into all and any transaction, which is impossible. There were reports from the auditors that U.S. Senate and Congress sent to Ukraine, and then he found no misappropriations. However, I personally believe that there could be misappropriations of funds. Simply believe that Ukraine for so many years was part of Soviet Union, which was the most corrupted country. And then they were in the shades of Russia, which is even more corrupted country than Soviet Union. So Ukraine could not become a kind of an island where there is a corruption is going all over the places, and Ukraine is completely out of it. I don't believe that could not happen. The only thing is, what I can say is that starting from 2014, and anybody who is interested, please do yourself a favor, watch the documentary on Netflix by the name Winter on Fire. You will have much better understanding why today Ukrainian nations is a new nations, which has really very little to do with what was happening before 2014, and especially what's happened in February of 2022. Now, the corruption is something that officials in Ukraine are well aware of it. They are taking all necessary steps to curtail it. It's not easy because of the country is fighting existential war. And to tell the truth, beside the weapons, ammunition, which is going as soon as it's delivered to Ukraine, it's going on front lines. So I hardly can see anything happen there. So the most something what I could see could happen with the financial assistance, specifically humanitarian help. There could be some problems, but I think it should be fixed as soon as possible. That's my opinion.
That makes a lot of sense.
I'm sorry, Mark. Is it responsible for us to give them funds then, knowing that corruption is so much ingrained in their society, not have any accountability?
Well, as I
Oh,
said,
come on. No. Be fair. Now, they gave $18 million back to the Biden crime family, right? So it's not just going one way. It's going multiple ways.
well, listen, Dan, you're repeating the Tucker's narrative, and of course, Trump.
Oh no! Actually,
Actually,
it's based on the bank statements and the audit reports.
Treasury Department's own statements.
Yeah, now it's coming through. So Sasha, this isn't rumor; it's actually fact. They've got the documentation now.
Well, the fact, yeah, if there are the facts, then all the culprits, they have to be found, punished.
Yeah, the fox is in the hen house.
But
Or the White
Dan,
House, I should say.
But Dan and Lee and everybody else that's here.
Hasn't it
isn't
always been that way?
But not only that, but isn't this almost like the case
Yeah.
when the CIA and the some of the international agencies are making these investigations because the reports of what was going on in the Zelensky-led government and everything were actually coming from CIA and other international sources. I think maybe even the UN and everything. But isn't that almost like the pot calling the kettle black? Because there is definitely some corruption that goes on in.
Now you're being racist.
Well,
Now you're being racist.
no, I'm just using an old slang and everything, so we won't
Yeah,
go
okay.
there and everything.
I
But
just wanted
definitely,
to
my
point
question
that out.
is:
I guess
what-
you can do that. We can't.
it's a saying you can use it all day long. Yeah, but it's a saying that's been.
We
out
have
there
to say
forever.
calling the
You know, that's not even. That's a whole other
purple, right?
conversation.
Instead
But
of-
my
yeah.
question was about the corruption level and corruption on different.
Okay, so
agencies.
so just by saying that everyone else was corrupt excuses the corruption of other people, right?
I did not say that at all. My question was, and that's why I used that old saying and everything is, how can they be making these statements when they have their own problems that they need to address in the
Well,
corruption?
just because they have their own problems to address, you know, the military industrial complex has lost billions and trillions of dollars, right?
Right.
But just because they have their own problems doesn't mean that there aren't problems in Ukraine and they aren't real and they aren't an issue, right? It doesn't. It's to excuse it by the malfeasance of others is
They
immoral.
both can be true at the same time.
Right.
Yeah, they
And
can both be
that-
true at the
that-
same
that was
time,
the
and they
point.
are true.
And I think they both are true.
You got a good point.
And that's what I was making was that they are both need to do some cleaning up in their individual houses, which is what I was
Well,
saying.
yeah, but they won't, and they have dirty houses for a reason, and so do the Ukrainians. I mean, there's a reason for it.
I hear what you're saying and everything. I did want to get to another issue that we had brought up before, and it has unfortunately raised its ugly head again and all in that space. But every time we turn around, there is more gun violence. I think there was a recent shooting in Alabama. There was the shooting where the kid actually went to the wrong house and was shot and all in.
Well, you know, you go to an 85-year-old's house in the middle of the night and ring the doorbell, and he's going to be there with a gun, probably.
Well, the story that I heard was that they actually rang the wrong doorbell. They went to the wrong
Yeah,
house.
I know, but it was an 85-year-old guy who was probably fearful for his life, right? Because, you know, what?
Yeah, but Dan, in
who
all
rings the
fairness, Dan,
doorbell?
it doesn't matter the time of night. Someone rings your doorbell, and that's it. They don't break the door down. They don't come in the house. They don't bang. They don't scream. That does not give you permission, I don't think.
You're
to
right.
just start
You don't,
shooting.
but you don't open the door. Number one.
I understand that. He didn't open the door. I think he shot through the door.
But
That's my understanding. I don't have all the facts, but that's
Wow,
my
that's-
understanding.
That's amazing.
yeah.
Well,
And
I guess he must be pretty antisocial then.
And there are people that are antisocial in that sense, but I don't know that you got to have those kinds of actions. One of the things that I've been wondering is some people have been making this a whole conversation around the Second Amendment. I know that Nick has brought up that part of the conversation and everything. Other people are thinking that we need to have a conversation around mental health in the United States because a lot of people are having
Definitely,
guns,
Mark,
don't
definitely.
necessarily need guns and all in that space.
Oh
So I
yeah,
just
for
wonder
sure. Mental
Y'all's
health is a
thoughts
big
about
issue.
where is
Crime
the
and mental
issue
health,
and
drugs.
does
crime
the
and
NRA
mental health.
need to be involved in the discussion? Because sometimes they just kind of like seem to vanish and they are a major lobby when these things happen and they don't come on one side.
Okay,
of the
so if the guy didn't open the door, then it couldn't have been a hate crime because he wouldn't have known the kid was black.
I don't think they're alleging that. I don't think they're alleging that.
Yeah, I don't
They
think
were,
that's what
yeah,
they-
they were originally. But yeah, you're right. So it's just stupid. It's just stupid.
Mark, we also have a discussion about what's going on with our culture. Like, what's going on with Chicago? Are they rationalizing or, giving people permission to riot as long as it's somebody else's property?
Chicago, New York, Detroit, those places. Yeah, it was.
Is that peaceful protesting now?
I mean, what's the matter? What's the matter with peaceful protesting? Peaceful protesting has been
There's
part of
nothing wrong with peaceful
history for
protests.
a long
These
time.
are peaceful
Mark,
protests.
would you call Chicago peaceful protesting?
I have not been following the Chicago case enough to find out whether it's
This
peaceful or
past
not.
weekend.
Okay, well, I have to
No.
look at that to see what the nature was, but I do know that there have been protests. I mean, we just had protests recently here in North Carolina that was around housing and some of the employment issues and all of that, but they were, done.
Well,
in
you know,
that
you could always get a
convenient
job.
What did you say, Dan?
Get a job, you know.
No, these are folks that have a job. They just feel that they're not being paid correctly.
They're not being paid enough.
The minimum wage, the basic minimum wage, like that you can get at the lower side of the minimum wage, I want to say has been stuck at $1 stupid for a long time. That has not risen in a while. That's kind of like what the base pay is for like restaurant or people in the restaurant industry. And
Yeah, that's pretty bad, isn't it?
Huh?
It's pretty bad. That means you have to have multiple jobs.
Well, I mean, that's
No, it just means that these are entry level jobs for people either retired or people like, high school or with no experience. You have to start somewhere. And if you raise the minimum wage, these people are out of a job. I remember when I was in high school, I was working for Bupkis or whatever, but
Well, I
it was
remember
better than nothing and get your experience.
But Lee, even if their minimum wage,
And they're not meant for families to be supported on.
But even if their minimum wage has not the standard of living, the cost of living been rising at the same time. So how don't you need to have cost of living increases? Most corporations have cost of living increases.
Mark, what person who's supporting a family is working at a minimum wage job?
Huh?
What person who is supporting a family is working at a minimum wage job?
Oh, there are quite a few that are working at minimum wage jobs. If you look at like the restaurants.
Are they?
Yes, there are quite a few. I mean,
why is a 45 or a 35-year-old man or woman working at a minimum wage job? Where's their experience and where's their education? And why don't they have a higher level management or whatever job you want?
I mean,
Yeah,
what
why
was one of the biggest pushes in the country, and it happened like right before.
Why
the
didn't they
pandemic.
upgrade
I
their
think it is
skills?
still going on right now, which is that they were jobs, they were in those service industries that wanted the experience of older folks. So I remember that there was a push, I want to say maybe 5, 10, maybe even 15 years ago, to hire like older workers in companies like McDonald's, companies like Burger King. I'll go ahead and name some of them, and companies that were in that space because they wanted to get their experience, and and those folks were also had been pushed out of their corporate jobs, and for whatever reason, because of the age, so they still wanted to work. A lot of people don't want to stop working when they get to, I think the minimum retirement age is like around 66 or 70, and some folks don't want to stop working. I mean, Dan seems to be enjoying his retirement, but some folks are wanting to still go to work. I mean, one of the companies that I worked for, there were folks, and I think there's still folks now that are in their 80s and their 85 that are working at that job. It doesn't pay a
Mark,
tremendous
I'm not
amount of money,
enjoying
but
my
they like to
retirement.
have that work environment. Sometimes it's that work environment that we're losing because it's that interaction that they want, but sometimes they also just
Mark,
want
you're making
the
my
money.
point. You're making my point.
our
Those
point.
people are not there for the money. They're there for the social interaction. And as you raise minimum wage, there's going to be less of those jobs. So that you're hurting that whole population.
I mean, are you
Walmart
hurting?
greeters, that's
Huh?
Walmart greeters.
I mean, there's all kinds of jobs. I mean, the airports was definitely hiring a lot of people during the pandemic, and I think they still are for doing everything
Screening,
from
yeah.
the screenings to a number of the other things. And I mean,
That's totally
I
helpful.
think that if you're working those jobs and some of these jobs are not that lower end, but the people I'm talking about here in Durham that were going through that were actually, I want to say, some of the hospital workers and even some of the maintenance staff. And I know those are different ends of the spectrum, but
That's
both of
because
those
they
have
choose
been
to work on
complaining
those
about
jobs.
the fact that that Duke is a private institution, can definitely afford to pay them a lot better than they have been paying them.
How
So that is
can they
where-
afford to pay them more?
Huh?
How can they afford to pay them more?
A private institution that rakes in billions, if not multiple billions, cannot afford to do better in its pay system and all
I
of
don't
that.
know. I mean, can they afford? Can the students afford the tuition? Private businesses, like anything else, have to create wage scales. Typically, they do wage scale studies to determine what the prevailing rate is in the community, and that's what they pay. They
But I
typically
don't
have
know
to
that they
do that
do
based on EEO requirements.
and I know they do a great
I
job of
see.
those kind of like studies and all in that space. But were you going to say something, Sasha?
Mark, if the idea is to pay people money to social interact with each other, I think the best way is to do something like, for example, dance classes. So people will interact, dance, and will have very happy time. So this is much higher quality of life and interacting with people and enjoying each other than go to to work on very low paying jobs. So I think
They could pick up chess. Chess.
Well, like I
oh,
said,
chess clubs could you do
Yeah.
too, and
yeah, and like you said, it depends on the
Mind-backing.
nature of what people are wanting to do in that social interaction. I mean, I do know some folks that are into quilting and into dance, even some of the ones that you're talking about. As a matter of fact, I think tomorrow I'll see some folks taking yoga that are not paying that much. I want to say
That's
like
good.
$10 per class, and all in that space, and they're doing that on a weekly basis just to have that side of their life going. But there are some people that need the extra income because they also did not get the money that they thought they were going to get from unemployment and from retirement funds and from even the Social Security. I mean, haven't we said in this show and other shows that Social Security is about to go bust very shortly? And if that's the case, then you might need a secondary income. And if you need secondary income, do you want that to be low secondary income, or do you need income that is going to make that cost of living?
Oh, okay, so Mark, how is rioting or making going out with a picket sign going to increase anybody's wages? That's not going to work.
I mean, do you know it's not going to work? I mean, one of the things that they
Well,
were doing,
why
going in front of the.
why don't people upgrade their skills so that they can get better jobs?
And there are
How
people
about
that are
that?
doing that. Some of the people are going into newer fields. Some people are learning how to code because coding has been very much a big thing and all in that space. But
rioting and civil disobedience isn't accomplishing anything.
It
doesn't accomplish anything.
You can't say that because historically it has accomplished quite a bit, and it is definitely still.
Well, what has it accomplished? What has it accomplished?
You're going to tell me that the sit-ins did not make justice and changes within some of our civil rights laws that are still out there that Dr. King did, and all in that space. So that Dr. King was the premier person in terms of civil disobedience. So you're trying to tell me that the work that he did,
which party pushed the Civil Rights Act through the Congress? Was it the Democrats or the Republicans?
Civil Rights Act was under LBJ.
Well, but no, it was the Republican Congress that pushed it through.
But it was signed by LBJ, so it was actually
because he had no choice.
It was a bipartisan thing, which is what we need more of.
It wasn't a bipartisan thing. The Democrats fought him tooth and nail.
Well, some Democrats did, because you had some of those Democrats that were considered like the Boll-Weevil Southern Democrats and all in that space.
Oh, where you live, right? Where you live?
Not all, just here. They were in other parts of the South, and there were definitely some that were in other parts.
Where was KKK? What's his name? The Bird. Where was he out of?
I think
Senator
Bird might have been South Carolina. He wasn't North
Carolina. South Carolina.
But Jesse Helms was from here. Senator Jesse Helms was definitely from here. But I can't leave that just on North Carolina's footsteps, because as Lee knows, and as I know, having gone to school in Wisconsin and everything, that there are some radical groups that are like Klan-based and Klan-oriented that are there in the Northeast and the Midwest as well. Posse Comitatus comes to my mind immediately and everything, but there are others that exist there in that space. So you can't say
so that. So the Chicago mayor-elect is warning against demonizing rowdy criminal teens.
Not just rowdy. These kids are rioting, burning, looting, what have you, and also injuring people. Mark, now they're criticizing. Mark, they're criticizing Walmart for pulling out of these cities, and Walmart says we can't do business there. There's so much shoplifting and looting. That what do you want from us?
Well, maybe they ought to join. But that became an issue even during the riots of the '60s in Chicago and a number of other places. Sometimes the criminals are opportunistic. So if they're
hurting their own communities.
But I'm saying that's not necessarily the protest. The protesters try to find ways to address what is going on. So you can't. There are outside agitators in a lot of things that go on, including some of the criminal elements.
I agree with you. The outside agitators. Why are the people internal in those cities tolerating it? Why aren't they? No,
They're
we don't do
supporting
that
it.
in the
Yes,
city.
they don't
Why aren't they
follow
shutting it down?
They're
They don't
Why aren't
supporting
the
it.
follow
mayors
most of them-
shutting it
most of
We're
down?
not
Well,
prosecuting these
no,
thugs.
they do prosecute them in cities. I know they prosecute them in Durham.
No, they don't do it in New York.
I have brought up
They're not
before
Mark,
that
not
there
New
have been
York.
folks
And
here
then,
that
and then,
have
and then Vice
done a
President
number
Kamala
of
is
efforts to
bailing them
help
out.
people in that area and to address the issue even among the community themselves. I told you there were several, I think that was last year, several black male leaders that stood up to say that they would be having conversations with the gang youth and other youth and actually making sure that that was not acceptable in the community.
Obviously, it is.
wow, that
Obviously, it's not
wasn't
working,
gonna
Mark.
Huh?
That's
It's not
gonna
working,
work.
Mark.
You don't know.
Why is it, Mark? Why are certain states? Why is this happening in certain states and certain cities and not
Huh?
others? Why is this happening in certain states and certain cities and not others? Why is this not happening down in Florida? Why is this not happening?
Have you?
Not like this. No, like DeSantis got up there and says, no, I believe he got up there during the riots and says, the first brick, you're out of here.
No, but if you've been to Miami, there used to be riots regularly in Miami and Liberty
It
City.
used to be. Used to be.
And there's
Used to
still
be.
riots that are still there. They're not being all that time there, and there are people that do crazy things that you have to curtail. I mean, we got those bicyclists and others that do like that whole running down, being a nuisance, even here in Durham and all in that space. So there have
They used to call that
conversations with
streaking.
them. And so, but the question I've got to ask, which actually my friend Alexander Valderas brought, and it's actually something that y'all may agree with and everything. And but I'd be curious, is one of the parts that she brought up that I said I was going to bring up on this show and everything was how there has been a demonization. She called it, she used the Pharisee example for those of you that are very religious and everything, where there's been a demonization of the single mother, and trying to lay all the blame on the single mother's foot. And she's like, I know some single mothers that have done a lot of very positive work, a lot of great work, and you don't need to
So what does that have
demonize
to do
them
with anything?
and all in that space. Because apparently at a recent school board meeting here, they were trying to lay all the blame of society, or the majority of the blame, on the single mother. And I can't say
Well, what
it's
about that?
the
What
case.
about the men that didn't take responsibility?
Where are the fathers, Mark?
Well, I mean, and the fathers have to be there as well, and that is a
Well, that's a
conversation.
huge problem in the black community, isn't it?
Not just the black community, Mark.
More
Dan.
predominant all over now
video.
because what's happening is society is trying to destroy the construct of marriage.
I mean, when you say the construct of marriage, what do we mean by the construct of marriage? Marriage,
Mother and father in the home.
Mother
No, I
and
got
father in the
no, I
home.
got that, but I mean, let's also be very clear about the nature of marriage and everything. And like I said, well, I've not had the privilege of
God,
being
are we
in
gonna
that
go that
institution. It
direction?
is my understanding.
No, Mark, you
even
have.
from
You
some
were a child
religious
once.
folks, that marriage was originally intended as partially the love aspect, and that's what we all want, the Romeo and Juliet aspect and all of that. But a lot of the history of marriage is about marriage being a contract.
Well, no,
Well,
Adam
It's an
and Eve-
obligation.
No, I'm talking about a contract like the early days
marriage
of
is-
history.
marriage-
It was the
marriage
dowry.
between
It
a
was
man
a
and a
contract
woman
between the families.
is ordained by God. You know,
Okay.
so that's how that works.
But Mark, who suffers more when you have these single mothers? It's the children.
That's right.
It might be. It's nice that people want children, but is it fair to the children?
Well, I mean, that's part of the whole conversation around even some of the rules around abortion and everything. Because
Oh yeah, because he killed the babies. That solves the
Say
problem.
that they will have an argument about the loss of the baby when the baby is being killed during the
I got an
abortion
idea.
process or
Soylent
anything of that
Green.
nature. But how many of the babies that are unwanted are not covered from the time that they are born until they are 18? The government does not always do as much as y'all think they do and all that.
Not
And
the government's
another
job.
conversation is how much of that is the society's responsibility to help in that as well.
Well,
A lot of
what
these
about
children
the
are
parents,
not being cared for
speaking
at
Mark,
all.
where's your personal responsibility? Why would someone want to bring in an unwanted child into the world?
Huh?
Why would someone want to create and bring an unwanted child into the world?
Because they're horny.
No, but hold on a second. You're saying why would somebody want to bring? Well, first of all, there's some people that don't know that there's no guarantees. I mean, what is the percentages? I want to say that it's something ridiculous as to the chances of birth, the odds of birth, even in those processes are not like, it's not like every time that you have
Mark?
sex, you're having a baby.
Mark?
The odds are tremendously low.
No, they're 100%. Abstinence is 100%.
Abstinence is 100%.
100%.
Abstinence may be 100%, but is everybody going to want to go down that
No, the
abstinence
rest of
route?
it's
And
selfish,
particularly in the society
Mark.
that we
The rest of it's
live in
selfishness
now and all that. And I
and
don't know that
immorality,
abstinence
right?
is going
That's
to
what it
be.
is.
That's a valid point, but why aren't we teaching and stressing that?
I mean, it
Emphasizing
is, I
that.
mean, a lot of that is
Justify
taught in
it if
schools
you
and all
want.
of that. But
You think schools are teaching and stressing us to abstinence? I don't see that in
No.
public
I mean,
schools.
part of it is that when schools teach about sex education or they teach about a number of other things in society, then people get concerned about what is being taught, and then they try to say that you can't teach any parts of sex education and all in that space, and that becomes
I haven't seen that.
and everything.
That's not my experience.
They're still doing it, dude.
No, there's a number of schools that are giving you like basic, maybe very basic biology, because I think there's about every high school kid has to have some sort of biology course, so they will definitely learn basic
No,
biology.
actually, they do sex
But
ed
whether
most
there
everywhere
is
now.
a widespread sex education movement, I don't think that there is, and should there be, there probably needs to be a movement about a number of things in school. I've told y'all before that before he passed, one of my uncles was not too pleased with my own mom, because she just gave her nieces at that time, they were young nieces, the book My Body Myself. So that was just about a book that explained how the body works and all that way. And you know, that became a whole interesting conversation within our family, because folks
Yeah,
thought
my parents gave me a book when I was 8 about that kind of thing, so I could read about it.
right, and that's what she was trying to do, was make sure that they had a understanding of what was going on in their body and all along those lines. But we've gone over and we'll have these conversations. And like I said, I'm trying to get Alexander and others to come on. I did enjoy the conversation with Mike. I know me and Sasha have got to run over, and maybe Nick's already over there to deal with the Russia, Ukraine, and China show. But right now we're ready to get on out of here. We can have this conversation around morality and other things later on, and see if folks want to bring back that conversation on either Wednesday. I don't know if we have a special guest tomorrow or not, or in future editions. But right now, let's get on out of here, because we got to do.
Y'all have a good day. Take care, Sasha and Dan.
Have a
Mark.
great one. Thanks.